Now, a row that has been rumbling on through this week is, of course, the new hate crime law in Scotland, a law that's policing speech. And many Conservative politicians in the United Kingdom, not least the Prime Minister, have had a lot to say about it. Indeed, Rishi Sunak, speaking yesterday, said that we believe in free speech. Conservatives will always protect it. That was Rishi Sunak jumping to the defence of J.K. Rowling with her potential legal trouble over that new law. But it got me thinking, have the Conservatives always protected free speech? Because it's not just the new Scottish hate crime law that has restricted the ability to say outrageous or even offensive things. No, there was a law that was passed in 2003 by Tony Blair under the Communications Act that has forbidden what's called grossly offensive communication. The Conservatives, of course, have not repealed this law. And what has that led to? Well, it's led to one man in Scotland before the new hate crime legislation, but under this 2003 legislation covering the whole UK. Under that legislation, one man has been arrested for off-colour jokes about Captain Tom Moore. That was reported only a couple of years ago. Very, very disrespectful and distasteful words, but arrested for words nonetheless. Another man was arrested after filming his pug dog performing Nazi salutes. Some might say an incredibly distasteful joke. Indeed, disrespectful words that were used during that as well. But that got a call from the police. And a further man who, a very disrespectful episode this, he received a suspended jail sentence for an offensive video of a model of Grenfell Tower. It was a video that was sent around on WhatsApp. Now, we can all say that joking about Grenfell Tower would be an awful, disrespectful, frankly inhuman thing to do. But should it be illegal? Indeed, should the concept of free speech not apply here? And has Rishi Sunak been a touch hypocritical when he says that Conservatives will always protect free speech? Let's get more on this now with Dr. Benjamin Jones, the Director of Case Operations at the Free Speech Union. Benjamin, thank you for joining us. I want to dig into this issue here because people often say that we have free speech in the United Kingdom. But in certain cases, it seems like we don't.
I think we have free speech in the United Kingdom if you're retired and or independently wealthy and you don't have to rely on the good wishes of your employer to keep your job. You're not bound by upholding a statement of values as part of your contract. In terms of the legislation, I think I'd give 4 examples that apply in England or to the entire United Kingdom. There's the Public Order Act, which forbids stirring up hatred on the grounds of race or religious belief. That language of stirring up hatred is also used, of course, now in the Scottish Hate Crime Act. I'd also point, as you have, to the Communications Act, which makes it an offence to cause anxiety needlessly to another. The Malicious Communications Act also, and more recently, the Online Safety Act, which is going to place the internet in the hands of Ofcom, who will be charged with regulating it. And I think I don't need to
We're big fans of Ofcom here.
Yeah, I don't need to spell out for you or for your viewers what a disaster we think that's going to be at the Free Speech Union. So on the plus side, I would say that we do have the Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act. So that is in the credit of the Conservative government for doing that. That will protect students and academics and visiting speakers at universities. That's something that the Free Speech Union campaigned for many years. So we're delighted with that. But you're right, the picture is not a rosy one.
So I'm asking really, why then are so many commentators and public figures and elected politicians saying, isn't this awful in Scotland? We'd never do a sort of an act of parliament like the Scottish Parliament has just passed that came into effect at the start of this week. It seems that politicians have passed similar bills in England and perhaps most perniciously might pass more such bills yet.
Well, I agree with every word of that, but I would say that the Scottish Hate Crime Act is particularly egregious. I mean, in the last 6 hours alone, it's gone from being an abject disaster to an utter farce, and a sinister farce at that. It has this offence of stirring up hatred. That's on various grounds, curiously not on the grounds of biological sex, but on the grounds of age or transgender identity. And it has a much lower threshold for prosecution than the equivalent UK legislation does. So it includes, for instance, threatening, abusive, or insulting speech. Now, that, I submit to you, is going to include a lot of people who have expressed views that are the majority view across the UK, certainly the majority view in Scotland as well, about the debate about protecting women's spaces and trans rights and so on. I think also I'd point to the removal of the dwelling defence. Now, that means that things you say in your own home are not going to be protected. So if you call a member of your own family, let's say your husband or your father, a grumpy old git, that can be an offence under this act, a hate crime on the basis of age. So it's a completely farcical piece of legislation. Everyone warned the Scottish government it was going to be a complete disaster. But this afternoon, it really has got even worse than its worst critics would have thought, because we have the bizarre position now where non-crime hate incidents are not being recorded against the First Minister, who has become the most complained about person under his own legislation for a pretty notorious speech he gave 3 or 4 years ago. So a non-crime hate incident is not being recorded against him, but one is recorded still against the Scottish Conservative MSP Murdo Fraser, for his views about the trans debate, and for his view that saying you could change your gender identity was as nonsensical as saying that you could identify as a cat.
I spoke to Murdo Fraser actually a little bit earlier today, and he was making clear that his view was criticising Scottish government policy. He's an opposition politician in the Scottish Parliament, and under this new law that the Scottish government has passed, they've criminalised, in effect, or perhaps made a non-crime hate incident, whatever on earth that means, out of what their political opponents are saying. That's a really dark path to tread.
Correct. I mean, this law would have been bad enough if it had been applied even-handedly, but we are now in the position where if you are a government minister in Scotland, you will not have a non-crime hate incident recorded against you. If you are a politically inconvenient target, a target who's not going to be easy to bully, such as J.K. Rowling, you will not have a non-crime hate incident recorded against you. She's been incredibly courageous and outspoken in opposing this act. But what about ordinary members of the public? What about politicians like Murdo Fraser, who take a different view to government ministers? What about people who have job offers withdrawn because they have a non-crime hate incident recorded against them, which, by the way, they